in a coffee shop in Toronto. And we just like stop and we look at each other and we're like, just buy that motel. And the idea of this like one little weekend side hustle was completely escalated into let's become full-time moteliers, quit our jobs, move to this like tiny town of 4,000 people, move into the motel. And so it was just like a complete like whirlwind experience, really.
Welcome to another episode of the STR Sisterhood. I'm your host, Stacey St. John, and I am so excited to spend some time with you today. Now, before we jump into this fun episode, I want to share a quote with you that I recently read, and it says, "The purpose of life, after all, is to love it, to taste experience to the utmost, to reach out eagerly and without fear." What beautiful words come to us from former First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. Now, in this episode, I am sitting down with Sarah and April, the founders of the June Motel, and they are talking all about their early days when they took on their first boutique hotel, renovated it, and guess what? They've expanded to number 2 and number 3. And yes, Netflix came a calling in the meantime. I can't wait for you to meet them. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with April and Sarah. All right, friends, today we are joined by April and Sarah, and I am so excited for this interview. We're going to be talking all about their journey in launching boutique hotels. April and Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you for having us.
So I want to go back to the very beginning. First of all, tell us how you met and what got you thinking about the world of hospitality.
So Sarah and I met, my math is continually bad at this, I think like 23 years ago now. Wow. When we went to University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario in Canada. And yeah, we kind of became fast friends. I think we both really bonded over like a love for the world and traveling and like always kind of had that commonality. After university, we traveled a bunch. We both, lived different places and also in Toronto for many years and kind of working our various jobs. I was working in PR and marketing and Sarah was working for the Ontario government and still like very good friends in the city, like kind of constantly dreaming of doing something else. But it wasn't until 2016 that Sarah and I got together. Well, it was like shortly after New Year's, and we were just like, this is the year. We are going to make some big changes in our lives and our careers. We were both kind of at that point, I think, in our career that we really craved something new. But truly, like, becoming a motelier was the furthest thing from our minds when we entered that year. And so we sat down, we cracked open a bottle of wine, we're brainstorming like probably like 50 different business ideas. And at this point, like truly, we're just kind of thinking of side hustles even. Mm-hmm. There's this little place called Prince Edward County, 2 hours outside of Toronto, that we had been going with our girlfriends on wine weekends. And Sarah had bought a cottage out there. We really loved the area. And so we always kind of knew that there was an opportunity to do something there. So a lot of our ideas were like, oh, what can we do in Prince Edward County? And one of the ideas was this idea of creating an adult wine camp. And so we just wanted like a really fun weekend, bring people together, make like this, like take over someplace and make it kind of like really cool and Instagrammable for the weekend. And as we thought through the idea, we're like, okay, where are we going to host this? And Sarah always has her pulse on the real estate market. And so she's like, oh, there's this motel that's been for sale. It's at Piston. It's a real dive, but like maybe we could make it cute for the weekend. Maybe 5 minutes into that conversation, we're in a coffee shop in Toronto. We just like stop and we look at each other and we're like, just buy that motel. And the idea of this like one little weekend side hustle was completely escalated into let's become full-time moteliers, quit our jobs, move to this like tiny town of 4,000 people, move into the motel. And so it was just like a complete like whirlwind experience, really.
Wow. I mean, so much to unpack there. And one of the things that I am curious about is what gave you the confidence and the courage to take that bold step, even though you were doing it together? And I'm sure that was a little bit comforting, right? That you could lock arms with someone else and you had someone else by your side. But still, quitting your jobs, moving, going into a brand new industry where you have no experience, that is a big stretch for so many people. Talk to me a little bit about what the mindset behind that was during that transition and how you leaned on each other.
Yeah, well, there's a few different elements to chat about there. And I think April and I both approached that decision pretty differently. I didn't quit my job right away. I actually stayed in the city, kept working, 9 to 5 as in the government. And then I would come home and I would do our bookkeeping. I would answer guest emails. And then every weekend I was driving out to the motel to check guests in, to help clean rooms. And, for me, I financially wasn't ready to quit my job yet. And the business wasn't financially ready to pay either of us really that much money. I had a mortgage. I think April was way more done with her work than, so I followed, 4 months later when it came to the point in time where we had operated as is for a season. So April and I ran this motel for fishermen for one summer. And once it came to the renovations, it was kind of am I in or am I out? Because it's going to take all that we have to make this happen. And I loved what we were doing with the motel so much that it was I had that taste and just wanted to be all in. That said, other things that gave us some confidence on making the leap, unlike starting a business absolutely from scratch, we were taking over an existing business. So this motel for fishermen, not exactly the business we wanted to be in, but we could see, we know how much we bought it for. We knew how much revenue was coming in. We knew what the mortgage was. And so we had this sense that worst case scenario, we understood, we could sell it, probably not lose that much money, have gained all this experience, could go find jobs again. And so I think always knowing, what's plan B if nothing's going to work out, can you live with that? And we could.
Absolutely. I'm curious about the hotel for fishermen and how it transitioned into what it is today, which is an absolutely beautiful, quaint place for folks to visit. Talk to me a little bit about how you created the vision and then executed on it.
So neither Sarah and I had really any background in interior design. We both dabbled in some personal renovation projects before this. And there wasn't really any money to hire an interior designer or even a general contractor, really. So truly, so much of that first motel was us rolling up our sleeves, YouTubing how to tile a floor, lay flooring, learning how to wallpaper, inviting all of our friends and family to come to Prince Edward County every single weekend and wallpaper rooms with us or paint walls or just, throw things in the dumpster.
Yeah.
So it was an all hands on deck, and it was a lot of muddling through it, truly. I think when it came to the brand and the inspiration of the entire property, again, we didn't, looking back, we were such amateurs back in 2016. It was us kind of just gravitating to things that we liked. And, we started by saying, okay, what do we want this place to feel like? We want it to be a place that, we would go with our girlfriends because that's the space we were in 2016. We were going on girls trips in wine country. And so we really put that hat on, thinking of ourselves and our friends as our ideal guest and our target audience, and asked ourselves, what would we want when we check into a hotel? What do we want that to feel like? So, we want to be greeted with a glass of wine. We don't want to do the boring check-in. And we want this motel to be just more than, a place to sleep. We want it to be a place that brings us and our friends together. And so we had all these kind of core values that we really knew that we wanted to weave into the experience. And from a look and feel perspective, we also knew it was really important to be like, I think back then it was about being Instagrammable. And I think, we were right on that cusp of brands figuring out how to leverage social media. And I really think it was the absolute perfect time that we opened the June, and we paid so much attention to what like the photo backdrop of every moment was. So what's behind the bed? What's behind the couch when you're sipping your rosé? What's your first impression where you're walking, up to the motel and there's these pink doors? And so everything is really, well thought out from a visual perspective. Yeah. I don't know. I hope that answers the question.
It does. And I want to ask you about the Instagrammable piece, because I truly believe that for folks younger than I am, probably your ages, the thought of being Instagrammable, like, it comes very naturally because there have been generations that have grown up with social media. Okay. Yeah. For those of us who are a little bit more seasoned in age, we didn't grow up with social media. And so knowing what could be Instagrammable is more difficult for folks like me. Okay. Right. So if I were to say to you, April, Sarah, what are a list of things that you feel like are Instagrammable, or how could you help someone determine whether it's Instagrammable? What would you say? How would you describe that?
Yeah, but I think it's changed. I think from the moment that we opened back in 2016, it was about these like really bold sort of photo backdrops. So, the palm print wallpaper behind the bed, or like we have this peace, love, a neon sign that says peace, love, wine in our lobby, and everyone kind of sits down and like drinks their rosé and has that photo backdrop. But I feel like that feels very like 2017, 2018, and it's evolved partly because the way social media has evolved to be so video based that it's less about that like one backdrop and more about, I think, the same essence of like, I want to show my best life and I want to show myself living my best life is still an underlying element, but it's less about that like one signature like photo backdrop and more about like everything feeling really cohesive and everything feeling really like authentic and like authentic to you as a person and really connecting with that place. And like that's like a story that belongs to you that you want to be telling on social media.
I want to go back to, you mentioned you did a lot of YouTube research on how to do tile and wallpaper and all that kind of fun stuff. What did you find that you already had within you skills-wise that helped you in the early days of performing the renovations and also today as you have grown your portfolio?
Renovations. I'm trying to think what we had in us. April had never used a drill before I taught her how, and like, what did I know about how to use a drill? So really, like, we were learning on the go. We had both done like small renovations in our homes, and we had, painted accent walls and done some stuff like that. I think we both really had an appreciation for design. And so we had this ability within us to see, again, this like motel for fishermen. Only art in the room was a sign that said no gutting fish. And
Grammable.
We can see the potential beyond that to like what more it could be. And so I think that more so than like technical skills is like this ability to see things. I think one of the things that we've really kind of fostered a skill over the years is also not just visually being able to see, but we like do this whole thing where we'll go in and we'll like plan an itinerary. So if someone came to our motel in Prince Edward County, starting to think like, what's their full experience going to be? What are they going to want to do? And so kind of building that out as we kind of build the business model and do the renovations. And that carries into the property as well. So how are we going to activate all of these spaces? How are guests going to flow? And so, yeah, a lot of like imagination, but that our skill has improved in like really understanding just the things that guests do when they visit.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you with using a drill today, April? I'm curious.
I'm like decent. I'm decent. I would say over the years we've learned to hire out many jobs that we did back in the day. So renovating motels looks very different than it did, but overall it developed my handiness.
I was going to say, I am the first person to admit, hey, I am skilled at many things, but home renovations are not one of them. So you do not want me picking up a paintbrush. You don't want me drilling anything. I can't even cut wrapping paper in a straight line when it has the lines on it. Like, it's bad. So anyway.
I do think it's really empowering as a woman to like try to gain those skills. And so, it was my dad taught us. April had an ex-boyfriend who teaches us things along the way. YouTube is great, and paint's a great place to start. If it's not that expensive, it's fairly easy to do, and it can make such an impact. And I think that's really empowering to be able to go into a space and really put your own personal touch on it.
Was there ever a time early on, or maybe even later in your journey, where you looked at each other and said, what have we done? Like, did you second guess yourselves? Talk to me about a time when that may have happened.
Oh, it happens all the time. Still to this day. But I think one of my favorite memories of buying the motel was we had taken the possession of a motel on the Wednesday. We ran it as the Sportsman Motel that first summer. Okay. And so we took possession on a Wednesday, and by that Friday, we had a sold out motel because the previous owners had taken all of these reservations. And it was just Sarah and I. We had no staff, no experience of running a motel. I think our parents might have been around helping us with things that weekend, but it was just mostly us, schlepping garbage and cleaning the rooms and stripping the beds and picking up these soggy wet towels up on the floor. And, at the end of the weekend, I look at Sarah and she's she's exhausted and has this giant smile on her face. And she's like, oh, this is the best decision we ever made. And I am literally almost in tears. So I was like, oh, what have we done? It was absolutely not the vision that we had. And I think we often we share a lot of our journey on social media, and we kind of joke, I think most people think that we're just sitting around drinking rosé, coming up with fun ideas and, going to the beach. But there's truly there's a really tough side to hospitality that is just it's a 24/7 business. There's a lot of inventory and garbage and cleaning, and there's a lot of staff to manage, and it can be a very grueling job. And I think I learned within the first 3 days how much hard physical work was going to be required for this to succeed.
Yeah.
I like to think 10% of the time, April and I have literally the best job in the world. 5% of the time, we have one of the worst. And then we've got 85% if we have a job and we show up every day and we get stuff done. But overall, the odds are still on the there's great days that do make this worth it in the end.
Absolutely. And in addition to a job, you are building wealth through real estate, right? Which is so much more than a traditional job can provide. So I'm curious about your expansion. I would love for you to talk about the other 2 locations that you're operating in. And I'd love to hear the story of when Netflix came a calling.
So 2017, we opened our first property as the June Motel. We had a great first season, and I would say by the end of it, we were always sold out. We loved that experience of taking that dingy roadside motel and creating this beautiful space that, would bring people together. And so only a year later, I would say we started shopping around for the next property. And we ended up seeing this one in Sauble Beach, which is about a 5-hour drive away from the other one. Still, it's 3 hours from Toronto. And it was this perfect 70s motel in this very charming little beach town. And it did take us a little while because we didn't like really know the area that well. So it took us a while to make the leap. But then, we really saw the potential. It was a really perfect property for us to expand to. And then it happened around the same time that our graphic designer's good friend, Jessica Namias, is a television show producer. And she had actually been one of our first guests that stayed at our original motel. And like a year or two later, she just has this light bulb moment of being like, that would make like really great TV. And so we met with her and really, she's an entrepreneur. So she has this idea. She convinces April and I that it's a good idea. And we like film a little interview. And then she shops that idea around proper television out of Toronto, loves the idea. And then so we filmed this bigger sizzle. And then they started shopping around. And so it was about a year between our first meeting with Jessica and when we, I think, got the call from Netflix or through them that we had this show idea. And so, it was an amazing experience. April can share some more details about filming a show.
Yeah, give me the behind the scenes scoop. Give us the nitty gritty details that nobody else would know.
That's a good question. Well, it was during COVID. So I think we had a very different experience filming a television show than many other people who have ever filmed a television show would have had. We started like pre-COVID and everything was trucking along. We're like, we've got the rooms gutted. And then all of a sudden COVID hits. And like, not only did production have to stop, but all renovations had to come to a complete halt. And so we're sitting here. We've had to refund a bunch of people's reservations at our original motel in Prince Edward County because nobody can come stay. So we've lost about $100,000 in deposits that, were sitting in our bank account. We've got a motel in Sauble Beach that truly is gutted. Like there's no option of just like operating as is for the summer ahead. And we're also going into a market that's extremely seasonal. So you want to be open, mid-May, because the end of the season is like mid-September. Like it's extremely short. And so we knew we had this like really tight window. And it was just like every day us kind of like coming together, wondering what the heck we were going to do. Will the show just like not exist? Like we at one point weren't even sure if we would be making a show when this all kind of came together. And then I think construction resumed and production resumed in June.
Okay.
And by then it was just absolute chaos. Like that was a summer of absolute chaos. And we like filming a show would have been a full-time job, renovating a motel, running another property on top of it, all different jobs that we had to do within the same 24-hour period, living in Sauble Beach. We're living with each other during COVID and like one of our employees. Everyone's masked up. Everyone's social distanced on the crew, like trying to film this show into these tiny corners, getting COVID tests like every 2 weeks. Yeah. It was a really, truly wild experience. And we ended up opening for Labor Day. So we opened for 6 weeks. We had a very, very short 6-week period. But we pre-sold like a ton of reservations when we launched, just because at this point we were like, okay, we need like money in the bank, and people had been like stuck at home for so long, not able to travel abroad. And we were basically offering them a place where they could travel without like going through hotel lobbies or elevators.
Sure.
An entire outdoor experience. And so I think it's one of the reasons that, our launch in Sauble was so successful, because we had like insane demand for what we were offering. And then when the show launched a year later, that demand just kind of continued. And so Sauble has been just like a really, really positive experience, growth experience for us. And even though it's 5 hours away, we've sort of really managed to like, I think, use that property really forced us to level up our game in so many different ways. Like, how are we operating? How are we staffing? the culture, that like the consistency in operations and systems, and, just like really develop that June playbook so that we can continue to grow. And I think we had thought we were there after the first property and like ready for that second one, but it wasn't until we had the second that we realized how unready we really were. And so it took us a long time to go from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Because like just there was so much work on the back end of our business that we just like needed to get right.
It's funny, in the world of short-term rentals, I often talk about launching a property is like going through labor. It is incredibly painful. By the time that baby comes out, you are so done, and then just a short while later, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so perfect. I want another one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, when I was pregnant with my second child, and my boys are older, they're 26 and 22, but I remember my aunt sitting me down and she said, now, Stacy, just so you know, once you have a child, when you have a second baby, it's like no big deal. You already know how to be a mom. And I remember after having my second kid, I was like, wow, my Aunt Dawn is smoking crack. Like, what is she thinking? Like, this is harder, right?
Twice as hard.
Hard. So it's funny when you talk about, you thought you were ready after the first one, and that second one was really eye-opening. It's good growth, but it's difficult growth as you're going through it, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about what systems you felt like you had to get in place first, or what you felt like you were lacking, and how you navigated that when you were looking to build that playbook or that operational firepower.
I think a lot of it is like there's a June way to doing things. And again, when April and I were on site at the one place, it was easy to just be able to point out and say, we like the coffee table book like stack straight, not on an angle. We like when someone walks in to say, like, right off the bat, are you checking in? Would you like a glass of welcome rosé? And so, when we are there, we can coach people on these things. But when we're driving back and forth 5 hours, we're not able to be there. So one of the really great tools that we've put together, we call it the style guide. So every space in the property has, back to the coffee table example, this is the coffee table. Here's a picture. This is like, we like these books. They're stacked. There's a candle here. It should be lit from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. There's, the plant here. And so being able to be really prescriptive, and we print them out in color. The team has them. This is in the guest rooms as well. And so it's a great training document when someone's new. And the June's all about having all of these special little details. It's what gives it all this character. But it is one of the things that makes it tough to just make sure everything's in place the way that it's designed to be. So that's been a great tool. Back to like the welcome rosé, it's having, an outline of a script and the key points that people need to hit. But outside of just the script too, it's coaching and recoaching and training and explaining the why, I think, as well. So why do we offer the glass of welcome rosé? It's because it makes it such a fun experience for the guests. If you go through all of, the admin stuff at the beginning, you haven't set it up as like the most fun welcome experience. If you start with, they have a glass of welcome rosé in their hand, makes like just such a fun, great first impression, and makes the rest of the check-in process a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I love that. And, something that you mentioned that I just want to say kudos to you is the why, like helping people understand the why behind what you're doing. I feel like allows them to buy in to the vision at a much deeper level. And it also, I've found over the years, it also helps get people on board with where you're going. So when changes are being made in your business, oftentimes change is hard for folks. And when they don't understand the why, oftentimes they find themselves regretting or not wanting to get on board with the change. But when they understand the impact, the vision, the why behind a change or a new process or a new training document, then it really helps them feel like they're in the know. And when people are in the know, they don't have to fill in the blanks themselves, right? Have you found that to be true with your people as well?
Yeah, I think that's like, we often debate, like, especially as we get a little bit more senior in some of the roles we hire, are we hiring based on like who's going to like really get the June and inherently like know what we're about and like train the hard skills, or are we hiring someone with like maximum hospitality experience but like maybe less of a cultural fit? And I think where we've kind of lately netted out in our conversations on that is it's better to hire someone who's going to be the June, live the June, understand what we are, and invest in that person gaining the skills they need sometimes than it is the other way around. So.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that I, teach my folks as well. I, in my business, hire by values. Again, are they going to be a good fit for our culture? Do they have the same commitment to excellence that we operate under? Do they have a high level of integrity and honesty? Those types of things are so much more important to me versus do they have experience with my property management software? We can teach them the software. Just curious, would you mind just sharing a little bit about your hiring process these days? Do you engage with third-party agencies to bring you candidates? Do you recruit yourselves? What does that hiring process look like for you as you're adding to your team?
So we haven't engaged a third party yet, but it could be something that we would consider in the future, especially looking for particular roles. Like the general manager is such a key role for setting the tone of the property and an important leadership role. So it's definitely something we'd consider when we need to do that again. We do post on places like Indeed for the jobs. We have a lot of programs in place to also retain staff as much as we can season after season. I think that's one of the most important things. And then something that we're really trying to do now as well is making sure that we consider internal candidates for promotions. People back to this, like, living and breathing the June and finding opportunities that they can grow their skills.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Love that. Okay, I want to switch gears a little bit and ask you about decision making, because oftentimes as women, I think it's easy for a lot of women, at least that I know, to get stuck in this world of it has to be perfect, right? So perfectionism, I always say I'm a recovering perfectionist. And some days are tougher than others. But I'm curious if perfectionism has ever gotten in your way, number one. And number two, how the two of you make decisions together.
I'm a perfectionist. I also am somebody who can see like every single detail and it'll like eat me up inside. So it's been like, it's been a very long journey, I would say, of trying to like deal with that and find, again, like going back to like the style guides and putting the right tools in place that I don't have to be in every detail. Those certainly have helped. But I think, some of the best examples are like every time we go visit a new property or one of our existing motels, it's like for the first 24 hours, all I can do is see the flaws and not just in what our staff are doing, but in, maybe how we might have designed it, or, I'm not loving a decision we would have made in the renovation. And it's all I can look at, and it eats me up, and I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated. I want to go like rip things out, redo things. And then about 24 hours later, I've like eased in, I've had some wine, I've chatted with some staff, I've seen some guests. And it's like, oh, everyone's having a really good time. Staff are genuinely happy to be there and like are actually really, really good. Like, we have really, really good people. And it takes me a bit to like kind of step back from like those like micro details and just see the big picture of like staff are happy, guests are happy, and we're making money. Okay. Life is good, right? Like I can go back and I can like fix these things in the off season, and there's project improvement plans, and there's a time and place for like continually getting better. And I think knowing that, like Sarah and I, every year, it's like, okay, what are we doing in Sawmill Beach? What are we doing in Prince Edward County? What are we doing in Beaver Valley? We have built like a culture around continuous development and improvement. And I think that gives me sort of some safety that I can table things for later and then put them all on a list and decide what the priorities are and what the budget has. And we know that we're going to get better every year. And I think that, really kind of helps me stay focused on like the big picture and like not get lost in like the thousands of little details that could be more perfect in every single moment.
I love that you have this culture of continuous improvement, because to your point, it allows you to notice things, but not freak out about them, right? So put it in the parking lot, put it on the brain dump list, whatever you call it. But it's so easy for folks to pivot and go down a total rabbit hole on this little teeny detail that in the grand scheme of things doesn't have any sizable impact on your business. So when you build a culture of continuous improvement, it's just the way we operate. We're always looking to level up, right? Yeah. And your people know that too. And they start looking for ways to level up. Yeah. So love that. So April, talk to me a little bit about decision making and what it's like having a partner to navigate decisions together. Do you agree on everything? And if not, what does that process look like?
So Sarah and I both have areas of the business that I think we both kind of have our, defined roles, and we have some autonomy to make, the decision there. Mine's marketing, hers is, finance. We oversee operations and design, development, growth, all of that. So there's a lot of areas where we're both weighing in all the time. I think for the most part, because Sarah and I have very similar values, and we have a pretty clear shared vision for where we're going in the business, that I think we agree a lot. But it's also a really great thing that sometimes we disagree. And I think often this shows up as we're, growing and developing and designing, and, both of our kind of personal experiences play into that. And I think, we'll each kind of push each other to come up with the best possible solution. So, I think I think because we have two people who are weighing in on those decisions, we're giving it more thought, and a little bit more banter back and forth, a little bit more debate is playing into that. And really we don't want it to be just, kind of one direction always. We want varying opinions at the table and varying perspectives at the table, because I think that's going to help us create the best possible outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, if you were talking with someone who was thinking about buying their first motel, what would you tell them?
That's a great question. I would say make sure you love it, because it's a lot of work. I think there's people that have a vision of buying a property and sort of like stepping away from it, or it's going to be, it's going to run itself. It never runs itself. It's a 24/7 business, and you are in the business of hospitality. So you better like to understand people and like to service and go the extra mile, because I think that's what makes people good in this business. And so I think being honest about what parts of the business you really are passionate and excited about, and maybe what parts of the business that you don't have those natural skill sets. Like, where can you either find great partners to bring in for those elements? So whether it's I'm going to go out and buy a hotel, I know I'm going to be really good at designing and experience, but I'm not going to be good at the day-to-day operations. Okay, find somebody to partner with who's going to be really good at the day-to-day operations, because like all of these aspects of the business are a lot of work. And if you don't show up with passion and excitement for, the art of hospitality, I think it really will show. And so, yeah, I guess that would be my advice.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay. I could sit here and talk to you for hours, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. I want to move to the lightning round. Okay.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. I'm just going to ask you to answer with the very first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
First question is, where is your favorite place to vacation?
Oh my God. Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay, now that's random.
The first place that came to mind, I had 2 kids. My parents have a house there. And it's just like, it's kind of our happy place every winter. Lots of great hiking. Kids have a pool. Grandparents are there. It's just
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. All right. What's one place you've never been that you want to visit?
So many places. Japan.
Yes. That I was going to say, I have heard from so many people that it is a trip of a lifetime.
Right. I feel like I haven't done a trip of a lifetime in so long. I've just been, building a business, having kids. And so I'm in a different phase of life, but I'm excited to I want to be culture shocked again. I want to go somewhere that just feels so different.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. All right. Next question. What's one thing you know now that you wished you knew when you were starting out in the world of hospitality or motels?
I think that you don't have to do it all yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think for us initially, just due to budgets, we did feel like we had to wear all of the hats. But as we've grown the business and realized that you can find really great partners, and what you can create with other people is sometimes just way more impactful than what Sarah and I do just ourselves. And a perfect example is our restaurant partners in Sable Beach. We could have just operated that restaurant and tried to figure out how to do that, but we aren't excited about operating a restaurant. We have no experience doing it. And I think when we're on property and we see what they've brought to the table and what together we're able to create at that property is really, really special.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought that up because, again, I think a lot of people assume I have to do everything on my own. I have to do everything myself. And to your point, I was just actually at a Disney resort. I had a retreat. I hosted a retreat at Disney. And I was getting the tour of our resort from the Disney staff member. And she was telling me, okay, now these restaurants, in these sections, these are our in-house restaurants. And these restaurants over here, they're operated by third parties where we've brought them in. And I just want to share, April and Sarah are bringing in third parties in a small boutique, hotel, motel scenario. Disney is bringing in third parties to run their restaurants in, I would say probably one of the gold standards in hospitality. So I love that you gave that advice. That's great advice. Speaking of advice, what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given? It doesn't have to be with the world of hospitality, just anything in life.
That's another good question. I don't even remember who gave it to me. It honestly might have been Sarah. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. I think, we got distracted with a lot of sort of seemingly exciting projects over the years that have distracted us from the core business. And I think somewhere along the journey, we had to kind of really sit down and be very clear about what do we actually want here? What are we working towards? And for us, it's more motels. It's creating amazing places to stay where people can really live the good life and bring the June to new destinations. That's what lights us up. And so if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no, because everything we say yes to takes us away from something else. So really protecting our time and making sure that it's put towards the stuff that we're most excited about, that's just going to drive the most growth.
Yes. Love that. Great advice. All right. Last question. What's one thing and or person that you're grateful for today?
Oof. Sarah? But I'm so happy a business partner. I could not do this alone. I fully cannot do this alone. I think, when you have a really good friend as a business partner who, you have a really clear shared vision with, it's very easy to get stuff done and stay motivated and stay on track because, you have one another to like keep you accountable to stuff. But also like when you have a really bad day, you've got somebody right there that like understands it and can empathize with it, help pick you up. And when you have a really good day, you also have somebody to open a bottle of bubbly with and celebrate like your amazing win. So yeah, find yourself an amazing business partner.
Love it, love it, love it. April, if folks want to find out more about you or learn more about the June, where is the best place for them to find you online?
Yeah, so it's thejunemotel.com or the June Motel on Instagram.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here. I know we had some technical glitches with Sarah's internet, but please, please, please give my best to her and tell her thank you as well.
Thank you so much. This was fun.